YouTube, with the Brooklyn Nets going through quite a lot over the past few years in their franchise, losing superstars like Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden all within a couple years, getting assets back for them, trying to be a contender last year and a young and up-and-coming team with standout stars like Mikal Bridges and hopefully who you could develop in Cam Johnson. Some interesting pieces on the roster to say the least, like Ben Simmons, and an emergence of Cam Thomas and Nick Claxton. Now, the Brooklyn Nets are in a weird spot because, technically they have a lot of good young talent on their roster. The problem is they're just not good enough right now to compete in any meaningful way within the Eastern Conference. So there's been much speculation about the future of their best player, and that is Mikal Bridges, and whether or not he'll be traded this offseason so that the Brooklyn Nets can enter a long-term rebuild and finally get this ship rolling organically, right? And so in this video, I want to talk about, they've mentioned multiple times that, they've been offered a ton of draft picks for Mikal Bridges, but intend to keep him around to try to add another superstar to this team in hopes to contend in the Eastern Conference next season. I personally think that could be a big mistake for the Brooklyn Nets future. And in this video, I'm going to explain why and what everything, involves with their draft pick situation, their cap situation, what, their future could look like not only next season, but years moving forward, and what's the best thing for this team and why I think maybe they're making the wrong choice. What's next for the Brooklyn Nets, folks? Let's talk about it. So, first thing I want to mention is that the Brooklyn Nets could be doing a play that you see from a lot of front offices where they say they're trying to keep their best player, even though they're really trying to trade him. And that is basically to increase the market for them, right? Like if you say you're going to keep Mikal Bridges, then, teams might be more inclined to offer more for him, even though you intend to trade him. So that could be a strategy. I don't think that's what's happening here. I do think they are really serious about contending next season and, seasons moving forward, and they do not intend to enter a rebuild. Why I think this could be a mistake is because right now you're in a weird spot. You're kind of in NBA limbo, which is, mediocrity, right? And that's going to be your roster next season. You have some big time free agent decisions to make, and you have some big time, this is a crucial offseason for the Nets. But when you really think about it, their situation with the cap and draft picks isn't really great enough to acquire another star. I mean, I know that Brooklyn is a hotspot location for where, great players want to play. We saw that with Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving. It's, New York City. Obviously, there's going to be some attention that they're going to get if they have an opportunity to get a star. But to be honest with you, unless something big changes, and we'll get to that in a little bit, this team doesn't really have the assets to acquire a superstar level player with the way things are right now. I mean, in my opinion, it would take a lot of depth to be added to this team to be able to compete next season along with a superstar level player. And I just don't know how they're going to be able to do that in one off season or two off seasons. And so, I think that maybe trading a Mikal Bridges for, the third overall pick and some future, first round picks from the Houston Rockets could be a really, really good deal. I'm not sure Mikal Bridges' value is ever going to be higher, and he's a great player. And I think he has what it takes to be at least at the minimum a third best player on a championship level team. But, Brooklyn just doesn't have a lot of assets. Let's talk about their draft picks a little bit, and then we'll get into their cap and some of the decisions they could make in the offseason. So as it stands right now, I don't believe the Brooklyn Nets have any draft picks in 2024. And, that's kind of a big deal if you're trying to acquire a superstar. I mean, in 2025, they have Phoenix's first and Miami's second, right? And then in 2026, they only have 2 second-round picks. So, right off the bat, you don't have picks this year, and you only have 1 first-round pick within the next 3 years. So, that's kind of troubling if you're the Nets. In 2027, they have 2 first-round picks, which could be, those are going to be the ones they look to trade, I would imagine. 2028, you have a first and 2 seconds. 2029, you have 3 firsts and 3 seconds. And in 2030, you have all your own picks. So the thing is, like, you have a lot of future draft picks if you want to trade them, but you don't have a ton of, picks right now to trade. Like within the next 3 years, like I said, you only have 1 first-round pick. And I think if this risk situation doesn't pay off to where you don't land a superstar and it doesn't really go well, and, some of the free agency things don't really line up the way you want them to, you're basically gambling with your entire future because, you could have had a bunch of first-round picks, including the 3rd overall pick in this year's draft from the Houston Rockets. You decided to pass it up to try to contend, and now you're left with, a bunch of scraps, right? Like nothing almost if this doesn't work out. So this is a very high risk, high reward type of strategy that the Nets are going with here, and I just don't know if it's the best option. I mean, I'm not saying trade Mikal Bridges this instant, but I think if you can get the 3rd overall pick and, maybe 3 firsts along with that from Houston, I mean, I don't know why I think you at least have to consider that, intensely, right? I think that is a really good deal. I mean, I'm not sure you're ever going to get much better than that for a guy like Mikal Bridges. So like I said, in terms of their roster right now, it's pretty mediocre. They're a borderline play-in team right now, and all of their hope will rest on getting a superstar, right? And like I said, if that doesn't go the right way, I mean, this is a total bust of a plan. So I do think the right thing is to enter a long-term rebuild, sell what you can now and sell high while you can, and then try to, rebuild organically. If you guys remember, the Nets Nets have really struggled to do that throughout the years, because when the Kevin Durant and James Harden and Kyrie Irving thing happened, they sold away their future. Obviously didn't work out the way you wanted to. Those guys only playing like 20 games or so together within a 2-year stretch or something like that. They had a good young organic core that they acquired through draft, and their future looked really bright, and they kind of sold that away for those guys. So I'm really cautious that, if I'm a Nets fan, I don't want that same thing to be happening again, and that looks like maybe what could be happening. Now, as far as contract situation, this is where it gets interesting, because the big, name to note is Nick Claxton, who I believe will be getting a really big payday in the offseason. I mean, we could be looking at upwards of $150 million contract for Nick Claxton over several years, and he is a really young, great center. So I think, if the Nets decide to let him go, that's obviously a big loss. I mean, the problem is with the cap, they have a good cap situation right now. I mean, because the Ben Simmons contract will be off the books in 2025. The Cameron Johnson contract, not great in hindsight. I do like the move at the time, but he struggled to stay healthy, and when he has been healthy, he looks more like a role player than, a core, top 3 player, right? So you have Cam Johnson on $20+ million until 2027. Mikal Bridges is on a really team-friendly deal, which is amazing for, he's not making anywhere near the max. He's set to make $23 million next season, which is really good for you guys if you are the Nets. But Dorian Finney-Smith on a pretty big role player deal, similar to what KCP had, and he will have a $14 million contract next season. Dennis Schroeder, who you acquired at the deadline from Toronto, another good role player, $13 million next season. But then from there, it's a lot of role players, and obviously Cam Thomas is on his rookie deal still, and will have 2 team options, including next season. So he's going to be up for a big extension. Claxton is what looks like the big man of the future, and he's up for a big extension. So if you decide to pay Claxton, right, that's the big thing I want to talk about. If you decide to pay Nick Claxton, that basically means that you pay Claxton and you extend Cam Thomas. And even if you do let Ben Simmons walk, which I would assume they will, and get that $40 million contract off the books next season, that's $40 million in cap space basically for 2026. But with those 2 big extensions, Cam Thomas is going to get a bag, absolutely. So with those big 2 extensions, you're basically looking at not a lot of cap space, right? You might even be over the first or second apron at that point. So the question then becomes, you're not going to be able to get a superstar in free agency next season if you decide to keep Nick Claxton and Cam Thomas. There's a lot of speculation that Nick Claxton will be going to a different team, which I think is totally possible. And that, again, I don't know if I love that for the Nets, because this is a guy that's really young in his prime and has a lot of, like I said before on this channel, maybe even DPOY type of, defensive talent. So if you let Nick Claxton walk, I mean, that is a huge loss and only adds to the risk of this plan that is trying to contend the next couple of years with these guys. And I don't know how you let a guy like Nick Claxton walk and feel good about it, right? You're certainly going to have to extend Cam Thomas. I mean, he's one of the best, breakout players this season, really looking like he could be a 25 a game scorer for the rest of his career, So what I'm saying is, I took a long time to get here, but my point is, you're not probably going to be able to find a free agent superstar in free agency, next season, right? So you certainly can't this season. And if you want to try to do it next season in free agency, you're going to have to let Nick Claxton walk and maybe not even extend Cam Thomas. So it doesn't look great for the free agency front. Now, the draft picks, you do have a lot of future picks, and that's why I'm thinking it will have to be a trade that you make for a superstar. Could be a Donovan Mitchell type player, could be, but it would have to be someone of that caliber. I don't think you can get a guy like DeJounte Murray to come in hopes that it'll, put you over the hump. I don't think that's the type of player or caliber player that's going to do that. So you really need a top guy on this team if you want to compete next season, or, a couple years from now with the core that they have now, and that's even assuming they lose Nick Claxton. So they're in a really tricky spot, man. And I really do feel for Nets fans, because it feels like this same thing could be happening again, where it did with the big 3 type situation, where you traded away guys like Jared Allen and Spencer Dinwiddie and D'Angelo Russell. I know a lot of those guys didn't pan out the way you thought they would in their career, but they did come from the Nets, and you had a good, bright future ahead of you and a lot of assets too. So I do believe this is a mistake on the Nets part. The best thing the Nets could do would be to trade Mikal Bridges to the Rockets for the 3rd overall pick, get the best player available, and maybe even like 3 future firsts, right? Like, there's been rumors that they've been getting like 4 first-round pick offers for Mikal Bridges. You got to cash in on those, man, especially, with that 3rd overall pick that is so incredibly valuable. I don't have to explain that to you guys. You get all those, draft picks, and you just try to build for your future. Maybe you trade the Cam Johnson contract, maybe extend some of the younger guys like Nick Claxton and Cam Thomas. You let Ben Simmons walk in free agency, and then all of a sudden you have a ton of cap space in free agency, right? For, when your draft picks are developed, maybe 2 years, 3 years down the line. And that's how you build a contender. I mean, this doesn't have to be an overnight thing. I think it could be, you guys could be sitting in a really good position in 4 years or so, or 3 years or so, and get to where you want to be next year, with a more certain, you know, less risk factor plan. So I think, you know, rebuild is the best thing. And I think the Nets are making a big mistake by not cashing in on these draft picks, man. I understand that Mikal Bridges is an extremely talented player, one of the best two-way wings we have in the entire league, no question about it. And he's not a guy that you want to let go of, right? But these are, you know, 4 first-round picks. I mean, you can't underestimate the value of that. I mean, at the worst, you trade them in the future if you don't want to use them all to pick, right? And I mean, you really have an opportunity to turn this whole thing around within a couple years. I mean, not a lot of rebuilding teams can say that, right? A lot of rebuilding teams aren't in this good of a position to cash out on assets and, you know, have a lot of things going for them in the future. It could take a couple years, but listen, man, I think the Nets really need to consider that, and I think that's what they should do. But unfortunately, I think they're being a little short-sighted here, and it's going to cost them more, you know, pain down the line. I think a lot of these teams that are mediocre and try to get that other star end up just having a rebuild in 3 years anyway. So in my opinion, you could only be prolonging the inevitable, and you really need like a top 10 type player to carry this team to where you want to be. And those guys are hard to get, man, and you're not going to be able to do it in free agency, as I established. It's just an interesting situation. We'll have to see how it plays out. Maybe they get some of these role player contracts off the books, like Cam Johnson, who is a really good player. You can get some good draft picks for him, but we'll have to see how this shakes up. Let me know down in the comment section if you're a Nets fan. What do you think of this direction your team is heading in? Who do you hope to get, you know, as that superstar guy that the Nets want to get? Let me know all that, because I'm really curious from a Nets fan's perspective. I think this is a bad move. I think it's given me like, you know, KD, Kyrie, James Harden vibes all over again. And I think a rebuild's going to have to happen eventually. And I think you're just prolonging it at this point. I mean, who knows? Maybe they get a great star to come in and do that, but I just don't see it happening within the next couple of years. And then, you know, you're just wasting time. So this is a great opportunity to start a rebuild and really accelerate one with all these draft picks you could be getting for these guys. But I think they're going to let Nick Claxton walk. And I think that's a big time mistake. And I think they're not going to get all these picks for Mikal Bridges. So let me know down in the comment section what you think. Like I said, if you're a Nets fan, whatever, what do you think of this situation? I think it's a mistake. I hate to see other fans go through something like this, you know, because I feel for them. You know, I've been through stuff like this as a Sixers fan, and it just hurts to watch, right? It's a hard, you know, hopeless time when it's like this. So hopefully you guys get through it, and hopefully you do get that superstar, right? And the East is getting tougher every single year, and so hopefully the Nets understand that, right? But I think rebuild's best, and hopefully you guys, you know, enjoy. You don't have to agree, but hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure you guys drop a like if you did. Subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. We're uploading content just like this every single day. We talk about basketball every single day on this channel. The finals are almost over at the time of recording this video, and there's going to be plenty of stuff to talk about in the offseason. Free agency, who knows, maybe even another Nets video if they make a big trade, right? But free agency, draft, Summer Olympics, right? It's going to be a great time. So make sure you guys stick around. Every day uploads on this channel. I will catch you guys in the next one. This is your boy D Haven. As always, peace.